Hello there, and welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I'm joined by Greg McLaughlin from the Rebel Base Card podcast, as well as Greg Cass, aka EyeOnCanon, to celebrate 5 years of Star Wars on Disney Plus. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Also, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it is time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. We have an excellent action-packed episode for you here today. Can you believe it? It's already been 5 years since Star Wars has been on Disney Plus, and actually that Disney Plus has released. We take you back to November of 2019 in this episode, and of course, we're joined by the Breakfast Pack fellas, Greg and Greg, which is a real treat, but also I have my work cut out for me in this episode in order to make sure that I don't mix up the Gregs or all that stuff. So we have Greg McLaughlin from the Rebel Base Card, as well as Greg Cass, aka EyeOnCanon, on the podcast today to chat all things Disney Plus over the last 5 years and just kind of retroactively reflect on that time frame, as there was such an expansive time for Star Wars and for Lucasfilm, but also a lot of lessons to be learned in that time frame as well. And so it's great to look back on this time frame, especially as we're kind of winding down this era of the streaming wars and coming out on the other side with maybe some lessons and positivity and things to change and tweak slightly in order to make things absolutely the best product that it can be. So we go all over the place. We talk about all the different shows that have come out, the volume, marketing, where we were on November 12th, all that fun stuff. So I can't wait for you to listen to our really, really in-depth episode here. Before we get into that, we do have a good amount of Cloud City gossip today. So let me just get into some of the big news here. And of course, I am recording this, the news segment, basically almost at the stroke of midnight on the Saturday before releasing the episode to all of you on Sunday morning. So basically, this is as late as I can possibly get without releasing it on Sunday, recording and just releasing on Sunday morning, because I got tired of recording last week. And then as soon as I literally got done saying, oh, there's no news for this week, that all of a sudden a Skeleton Crew trailer comes out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, of course. Yes, this would be my luck, right? So apologies for you folks that listened to last week's episode, and you're probably like, what the heck is this guy talking about? Of course there was some news. Something big just happened here. A new poster came out, and Skeleton Crew trailer drops and all this thing. Come on, Anthony. Also, you may have heard D23 in Brazil is happening right now, and that frankly was the news going to start today. So we got the announcement that Andor Season 2 will officially release on Disney Plus on April 22nd, 2025. So we are actually in the end game, if you will, less than 6 months away from Andor gracing our screens again. And it's been a while, because you may remember 2022 is when we got Andor. So been certainly something long time coming. We talk about Andor a lot in this episode here today. Can't wait for that. I see that they've changed the title to Andor's A Star Wars Story, I think lining up with Rogue One, which is exactly what they will do in this show. It's going to basically lead up into the events of Rogue One. I don't know if with Tivik or on Yavin 4 there, when Jin meets the gang for the first time, basically. Who knows? Still yet to be seen. So, for those that are unaware, this will be a 12-episode season with 4 arcs, each detailing one of the years leading up to the events of Rogue One from where we left off in Andor Season 1. And there will be 3-episode arcs each. So, 4 3-episode arcs, each spanning a year. Can't wait for that, and look for more details on that as we get more information and a trailer perhaps in the near future here. But Skeleton Crew is definitely the focus for everything right now. But diverting that focus a little bit, Deadline did announce this week that Simon Kinberg has been tasked to produce and potentially write, or at least couple together ideas somehow, for episodes 10, 11, and 12, which are currently potentially in development at Lucasfilm. So we'll take this with a very healthy grain of salt. I'm excited at the prospect of more Star Wars films, but we're just adding it to a long list of stuff that's currently actively in development. And frankly, this seems like a really early announcement. Uh, with nothing is written to paper. It doesn't seem like there's probably a basic pitch and all of that in order to, if it even is true, right? Lucasfilm is not confirmed. Disney has not confirmed this. There's nothing been officially announced. But Deadline is a trusted and reputable trade publication in Hollywood. So therefore, we do have to take it with a little bit of accuracy and certainty. Otherwise, you know, why do we have these publications to begin with? So we will trust this news source for now, and as more details come out, we will report on them as necessary. Really not a whole lot of details about what the story could entail, if Rey will be involved at all. We know there's the Rey New Order Jedi film kind of being in the works already. That's had suffered some setbacks recently with Stephen Knight leaving the project, the writer. So who really knows where things are going? But looks like Mandalorian and Grogu will be the next Star Wars live action feature film in the cinemas. So looking for that potentially 2026. And then who knows from there where we go. Anywho, back to the real thing that's coming up. The officially confirmed, definitely happening, coming out in December. December 3rd on Disney Plus is the Skeleton Crew, Star Wars Skeleton Crew, and a new trailer came out last week. And of course, I have it queued up here to watch. So we're gonna live. I'm gonna live watch it. I'm gonna react. You're gonna listen to me react. If you want to pull it up yourself, you can pause the podcast now and go to your YouTubes or wherever you get your videos and look up Star Wars Skeleton Crew. This is called the official trailer. So there, it, that nomenclature may help to differentiate what I'm watching. It's a minute and 59 seconds, and I have it queued up here. So if you want to follow along, great. And if not, I'm going to hit play in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hit play. If I can hit play. There we go. It's got this synth music playing here. Interesting. I do like the suburban aura that is within the show already. Finding something buried in the woods, parents getting involved, detention at school. This definitely screams Goonies. Neil. That's all I gotta say. I think we're Neil Nation here for sure. I think this might be the Onyx, the Black Onyx, or whatever they're calling the ship. I should know this because I saw the Lego at Anaheim in the Lego store. Poor Neil. Neil's driving this ship. Neil's the only one keeping things afloat. This is going to be a really pulpy show. I see this. Republic credits. John Nanawood, aka Jude Law. He's like Strider, just kind of running into these kids at this like bar area here. It's Cantina. Oh yeah, Neil's flying the ship. Yeah. Come on, Neil. I don't know what I feel about the music, like a real like Earth song being played in the background. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting grumpy. There's Smee SM33, the droid. We saw him in Anaheim at Star Wars, not Star Wars Celebration, but D23. This seems really pulpy. I like the idea of these kids just kind of going on this pirate adventure. Who knows where we could head with this? This is just a fun trailer. There's Carrie Condon. That looks very Goonies esque, like the skeleton skull. 2-episode premiere, streaming December 3rd. We got Skeleton Crew coming our way, and I'm frankly I'm pretty excited. I can't wait that we finally get some new Star Wars back in the fray again. It's been a while since the Acolyte, and it was nice to have a little bit of a break, and now to get back in the swing of things, it's exciting. And I think with the holiday season, this seems like a great adventure to go on with ourselves and our families, as we gather around for various holiday traditions across the globe and to celebrate all of that. So that, folks, is all the news that I had for this week. Thanks again for listening along to uh, me kind of talk through the Skeleton Crew trailer and just live react to that. I think there's a lot of fun and juicy stuff there in that I can't wait to see on the live action screen very soon here, less than a month away at this point. And on the other side of this very short break, we'll be back with our conversation about 5 years of Star Wars on Disney Plus. Stay tuned, folks. All right, everybody, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. And I gotta tell you, I didn't think that we had this anniversary coming up on us, but it came out of nowhere. I'll tell you what. If you haven't been paying attention, maybe this has just been sneaking up on you like it has been for me. But Star Wars on Disney Plus has been around for 5 years now, all the way back to November 12th of 2019, a whole lifetime ago, if you ask me. So we're here to chat all things about what has happened over these last 5 years, our remembrances of November 2019, that tumultuous time in the Star Wars fan base. And to hear, I got my work cut out for me, guys. I got two Gregs on the show, but we've had them both on the podcast before, but at separate times. So I'm gonna have to, figure out Greg M, Greg C. We're gonna have to figure out a nomenclature for which to not confuse everybody here. But we've got the breakfast pack. If you follow along with the Rebel base card, and for all the reviews and breakdowns that's been done since, I believe, Mando season 2, I think, is when you guys said that you started doing the breakfast pack, or thereabouts, maybe after Mando season 2.
It was Bad Batch.
Bad Batch.
So
Okay.
we missed like it was like Bad Batch season 1, and then I think a little bit of Book of Boba Fett. We
Okay.
caught the tail end. We didn't do it. We didn't do the whole series, but yeah, starting with Bad Batch.
Hey, start whenever you want. It's never a bad time to jump in. And you just, for the folks listening at home, you just heard Greg McLaughlin, one of the two Gregs here today, from the Rebel Base Card podcast. Greg, thank you for joining the podcast today. And how are you doing?
Oh, good. Well rested. We just got back from vacation and right into the thick of things. My daughter had a veterinary career day track that was happening in the middle of a veterinary convention. So it was like, expo halls, breakout rooms. I'm like, hey, we're the Star Wars stuff. Oh, this is not a Star Wars convention. But yeah,
You
and
were
then
teased.
I know I was teased, and then I'll be leaving because I'll pick up the wife. She went back to work today. But yeah, there was a car in the parking lot that had Arabesh all over it, and the fulcrum and the Ahsoka symbol. And I was like trying to find this person. I'm like, there can't be that many people in this place of telling that went. It was not even like a phrase. It was like 2 sentences in Arabesh on the back of their SUV window. And I'm like, take a picture, translate later, because that's what we do. Because I got to figure out what it says, right? Anyway.
Yeah, that's a lot. 2 sentences is an effort. That's not a like I just found this at my local Target and then put it on the car. Like someone went to Etsy for that. That wasn't a thing that they.
Somebody got the letters and put them on.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Okay. Well, welcome, Greg. Thank you so much. And Greg Cass, we got the other half of the breakfast pack here. You know him from the internet as EyeOnCanon and from a long take review, as well as many other things online. Greg C, how are you doing? And welcome to the Force Ghost Conversations.
Oh, it's so exciting to be back there. Actually, Greg M taught me a long time ago. The first invitation's okay, but it's when you get the second one that you're like, all right, I did something right, and I'm back around. Which, Greg, since I said that out loud, we got to get Anthony back on our show second time. But I'm doing really well. I just parked my car that's covered with Orabesh outside a veterinary convention in Chicago. No,
it was you. I know it.
I will say we were talking before we started recording. It's a tough week. It's been a lot to deal with, just stress and kind of the world around us. So I'm gonna just disclose to you two before anything else. The form my emotions took this week was to pay way too much money to get a copy of that Mon Mothma book that they released at New York Comic Con early. I paid an ungodly sum of money to a fan who got it himself, only to then realize he's like 2 towns over from me. I was like, "Oh man,
Oh,
I should have been your friend and we
Local
could have
pickup.
arranged this a
yeah.
little more affordably." But I'm really excited for that, and maybe that tips my hand about where some of these questions will go today.
Well, I think you already have tipped your hand a little bit on that one, and it's good to hear that there is no amount of money. Mon Mothma is awesome, right? So never don't apologize for spending too much money on a book involving Mon Mothma. I mean, I can't wait to get my hands on that book as well in the next couple of weeks here. Yeah, thank you both and also Greg. I had to bring you back on or Greg C, I should say,
Oh,
because. Greg M, you always have an invite on the show.
dang
But
it.
Greg C, I put you especially through the ringer the last time on the show with the acolyte. So, folks, go listen to that one if you want to see Greg suffer through a litany of horrible and philosophical
Tough
questions that
question,
were
but
tough.
good
listened to that
question.
thing was murder. I'm like, man, I can't. No way.
Even to this day, I'm still like, man, I really put Greg through the ringer. That poor guy didn't know what he was walking into.
Gleefully, I had a great time, and so it was always going to be a yes whenever you asked again. So I'm glad.
Awesome.
Hopefully, it'll be easier this time.
I think so. I think these questions will be a bit more straightforward, I will say, rather than philosophical in nature. But let's start with those first questions here. And like I said, folks, we're here to chat Disney Plus, the 5-year anniversary of it, and particularly want to go back to the beginning, November 12th, 2019, which was the first episode of The Mandalorian helps to give life to Disney Plus. And Greg C, we'll start with you first, with the softball, perhaps. Where were you on that day, and how did you take in The Mandalorian for the first time?
It's so funny to me to see that date and again to be celebrating the 5th anniversary, because I think of so much of the Disney Plus era as after the Skywalker saga, and
Mhm.
and I thought you really reminded us here that, like, oh no, it's actually a little bit of an overlap.
Yeah.
Before Rise of Skywalker came out, we came on Mando. Um, my intention that day had been to play some good old fashioned Wookiee hooky and to stay
Ah.
home, but I believe I did not, and that I actually went in and I did my full teaching day of work. And then I remember I watched the first episode that evening by myself, and then my local buddies and I had kind of made an agreement. Let's take the second one together. We were getting together, I think, on Friday night,
Mhm.
or maybe it was one came out on Tuesday and then the second
So
on
this came out
Friday.
on a
Is that right?
Wednesday. This was a
Yeah. Okay.
Wednesday, and then the Friday was the next episode 2.
Okay, good. Yeah. So I didn't break a promise to them or have to lie about it. I did actually wait, and then some buddies and I sat down and watched the second one for the first time together, and that was a really fun kind of way to usher in this new era of Disney Plus that was more like on being on your own in a lot
It
of
was,
ways. So
yeah.
it's like we still got the communal out of it. But I mean, obviously, I will never forget the final moments of that first episode,
Mhm.
and
Mm-hmm.
how they managed to keep that a surprise, I will never understand. But this kind of jaw-dropping final moment, and I don't think it's too dramatic to say that fandom will never be the same because of Baby Yoda and the popularity that he brought to this great moment. Sorry, I should say Grogu, but he was Baby Yoda
He was.
Baby Yoda
on
for a
the
long time.
12th of November.
Just in time for the holiday season, the greatness that was the Baby Yoda. The child was unleashed upon us, and then Baby Yoda mania went from there on out. I'm glad to hear that you thought about taking off work that day. I know many people that were like, I need just not even for the Star Wars itself, but they were like, I need to take off today just because I haven't seen any of these Disney Channel original movies since 2001. So they were spending all day doing that stuff while I was like, oh, the Mando's on, guys. I remember it being like a big thing of like, when will the app be downloadable? Right? Will it be
Yeah.
available at midnight? Will it be available at 3 a.m.? How will it even be possible to download this on this day? And eventually it did work out for us. But Greg McLaughlin, how did you partake in the celebration of November 12th, 2019?
Well, it's fairly easy because I know that it's my son's birthday, so he was at some point we had dinner. Um, but I was looking back because it had happened after Celebration Chicago, and not everybody has a podcast,
Yeah.
but mine had really gotten into full swing after before and after Celebration. So there was a ton of content, and I had to go back and I was listening to an episode I did around Thanksgiving time that was talking about like
Mhm.
Fallen Order coming out. The comics were in full swing. I was grabbing all those. I wasn't reading all of them, but I was grabbing them. Uh,
The stack was
Don,
piling.
the stack was piling. I was dying. I was killing the first wave of me killing Cal Kestis was well underway, and I bring in my son. It was beginning of his senior year, and I'm like, just finish this because I am just laying waste.
Tell
to
me
him.
how it ends.
Tell me how it ends. But the other thing is that we had I'd gotten introduced to a guy who was an extra in Mandalorian. He was one of the
Mhm.
bounty hunters, Dominic Pace,
Okay.
and he had been making a pretty big promotional blitz in order to kind of like, hey, I know what I have here. I have a golden ticket. I'd like to pursue this character, and I'd had a chance to interview him before the Mandalorian came out, and
Mhm.
he was doing a number of shows, and it was kind of weird because all of a sudden I got in that interview, and it was like we had a bunch of people in the office, and that was the time. It was like
Amazing. Yeah.
scheduled, organized, and I was like, I had to go into a room and in the middle of the workday and and talk about this for what it was, for the time he was there and on that.
Mhm.
But yeah, amazing now when you look back, especially talking to folks. You're always talking to folks about Empire Strikes Back and where they were, because I was just on Hyperion Hub, and one of the fellows, John, had just watched Empire Strikes Back for the first time,
Oh,
knowing
okay.
that cliffhanger, that thing was there, and now all of a sudden you see this, and you see the pram, and all of a sudden you see Grogu, and you just lost your mind. But I'm so happy that we did, because
Mhm.
like I said, like Greg said, there's not many of these moments. And it just felt like that first episode just felt so much like it was supposed to be Disney TV. It was very episodic. Greg
Yeah.
and I talk a lot about, what makes a good show, and did this really work for you, and how they cut it up, and all this. But Mandalorian just really felt like it was supposed to be for TV.
Hmm.
And it was just amazing to see all the little tie-ins and just how well it was produced. But it was like, man, this is a TV show. And little did we know, I mean, the people who were at Celebration got a little sneak peek that we
Yeah.
didn't. And it seems to be the modus operandi of Celebration. If you get into a thing like Greg did with Kenobi, you're like, even seeing it a little bit before we did, your mind is blown. But I'd been talking to a lot of sketch artists up in that time, so it was a good time. I mean, there was a lot of content going on, and
Mhm.
it was kind of fun. There was a lot. I felt even bad about not scheduling anything for a Thanksgiving Day episode, because I was like, people are traveling now. It's like I better load people up, because like I just finished driving a couple thousand miles, and I'm like, all right,
I got something to listen to. Yeah.
yeah, when the wife falls asleep in the car, you're like, podcast. Otherwise, it's like what I was showing you, classic rock stations from across the Appalachians, and every time the Scorpions are on, baby, I'm clicking that. I'm having her take the photograph and sending it to me while I'm driving. That's
Perfect.
just a wrap up of the time.
Hey, scorpions are always a perfect way to enhance your travel experience there. So I'm glad to hear that the Appalachian rock stations are keeping up with the good tunes. But also, I like what you said there about it felt episodic, and it felt good for television, but it also felt. I don't want to speak for both of you, but I thought it felt cinematic in a way, because I think that was probably some of our biggest concerns was how can this not look cheap and be on TV every week. And I know there've been we'll get into like that bit of a conversation perhaps later here, but I feel like that first episode was like a sigh of relief for a lot of us to be like, okay, this can work, because this was kind of an experiment at the time, which is cool.
I think that's right, and I love Doctor Who. I big fan
Hello.
of Doctor Who, but
Yeah.
the fear was that it would look like Doctor Who monsters, right?
Ugh,
and
yeah.
Doctor Who
Ooh.
has those cheesy monsters that are beloved, and I'm somebody who loves them, but I think it was a real concern, like you said, and so the fact that they could deliver on those effects at this budget or at this
Mhm.
scale. And the fact they went a little old schools, that it felt a little more OT, I think, won over a
Yeah.
lot of people. So
I think so too. That's a good way to put it.
Exactly.
So yeah, with like the start of the Mandalorian, I also like Greg McLaughlin. You noted how crazy of a time November of 2019 was already. So let's get into that time frame here just for a little bit. And it was probably like the craziest time for Star Wars. I can't think of a time either before or after. Maybe the only time that can come close to it is uh Mandalorian season 3, Willow, Bad Batch season 2, and Star Wars Celebration books, High Republic, and comics. Like that's the only time I can think of that is comparable to this. But this is all in 1 month here, and those fortunately had like a few weeks of maybe overlap. Versus this was like, holy cow, how am I going to get through November 2019 as a fan of this stuff? So yeah, so there was Star Wars and Disney Plus launched. Star Wars Resistance was still on TV. Fallen Order came out. The video game Vader Immortal dropped for virtual reality systems. Several new books and comics came out. And The Rise of Skywalker was just around the corner, less than a month after November 12th. So, as Star Wars fans who try to keep up with everything, did you feel overwhelmed at all during this era? Were you like, I'm gung ho about this. This is awesome. This is the best case scenario for being a fan of this stuff. Greg M, let's start with you. What were your thoughts around this month in general?
I think anytime you're coming up on a movie, right? We kind of do movies in threes. That's the Star Wars bag,
Mm-hmm.
and you really kind of felt it was probably kind of an end of this ramp up to like this end of this chapter, and it's you think now it's like, oh, it's so great because it hadn't happened yet. There all the little things that now that we kind of you know gripe or kind of like note or like the things we love and not love
Mm-hmm.
about Rise of Skywalker. It was such a great time because it hadn't happened yet. It's like, oh, the hype was we just all we had was the hype and the excitement of Mando, right? How about all those folks at Celebration who got those like the Rise, like the hats, right?
Like the
The
nine hats,
IX.
yeah.
The 9,
Oh, and you're
yeah.
like, yeah, where are those at now? When I could have really used one. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's some that are gathering dust, but yeah, it really did seem like, man, and then what you're talking about Resistance.
Oh yeah.
I couldn't believe it, Resistance as well, just to add something else. But yeah, it just seemed like, and especially like starting off with the first year of the podcast, that there was so much to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
and it seemed like so much was still ahead of me. I hadn't even met, it would be I think another year before I had Greg Cass on when he made that, the immortal YouTube video, for Joseph Campbell. And let me explain Joseph Campbell to you folks, and then the rest is history. But a lot of folks, a lot of podcasts I know also tend to start around those like milestone type years where you have either after the Disney acquisition or the Force Awakens, or a celebration. So it was just really like, man, we're just like off to the races. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of my recollection of it.
Off to the races. That's a good way. That's a good perspective to have at this time too, and especially when you're saying like the podcast was still pretty fresh and new, right? You were like, this is great. So it sounds like you're pretty gung ho about it. Greg C, were you gung ho about this time period as well?
Absolutely. So Celebration Chicago had been that past May, and that would have been my third celebration. So
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of deep into my fandom at this point. I'd stuck my toes in. I was like, no, 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 this is the thing to be doing right now. And I was kind of shocked to hear that full list you just gave because it is so much altogether. And the only thing you listed that I did not participate in was Vader Immortal, and that's simply
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't have a virtual reality
Mhm.
console. I still don't. So I haven't enjoyed that piece, but everything else you listed, I was full bore on, and Resistance I think is something that has faded a little, but is really special and wonderful, and people who love
Mm-hmm.
Resistance still
Mm-hmm.
do,
Mhm.
and I think it holds up very well. Right, it suffered a little from being between two movies that they weren't sure what the second movie was going to be doing and putting together,
Yeah.
certainly. But I think it is your question of did it overwhelm you, is it didn't, but I will say it does mark for me the beginning of this period where being prior to this moment, being a Star Wars fan meant you loved everything Star Wars. And I
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
after this, with the level of content that we've seen over the last 5 years, is it's turned a little bit into I like these parts of the fandom. I like this thing.
Mm.
I do this. I'm a book guy. I do just the video games. And while there are still a lot of us who do a huge amount of it, I think you really get more of that attitude of like, but these are the ones I really like. And then yeah, whatever. I watched that one, but it's not my bag anymore.
Yeah.
And and I think some parts of fandom had a lot of trouble with that, but that it
I think
is
they still
good
do.
overall. Yes, yeah. I mean, on the eve of Skeleton Crew, it feels like that entirely, right? That some people are like,
Mhm.
no, this doesn't look like it's for me, and I'm gonna freak out. And so I think it's curious that we haven't grown that much in those 5 years, but I do think
Mhm.
the list you gave kind of shows us we had to, because you can't keep up with it all that easily.
Exactly.
That's right.
That's when Star Wars fandom became one large Rush concert. If you've ever been to a Rush concert, there's the folks who like the 70s stuff. There are the Tom Sawyer folks. There is the synth 80s stuff, and then there's the people who hate everything else except like the 90s stuff. So essentially, my first Rush concert in 1990 prepped me for understanding the Star Wars fandom, because you go there and you're just like, it's just this diverse group, and everybody's just waiting for their turn to cheer, and then they'll go to the restroom during the other songs.
Who's going to the restroom at a Rush concert? Come on now. Who's doing that? I'm going to call those people out. How dare you? How dare you? Fly by night. It's around the corner. Oh,
I
I
love
don't
them
know,
all.
folks. Folks, were you expecting a Scorpions and a Rush reference in this episode? I hope you were, because this is what we're in
If you
for,
haven't
man.
listened to Force Ghost Conversations, you don't understand what really is the underlying current that makes Anthony go, and it is 80s rock music and Scorpions.
It sure is. It sure is. I was jamming out to the Scorpions before hopping on this call here. So hey, yeah. That's how it goes. That's how it
Do your
goes.
show prep, folks. Do
I
your
will
show prep.
show your prep, indeed. I will tell you, just by reading this list, I was exhausted by the end of it. and even getting into our next question here, which was, now that we've been 5 years in this kind of Disney Plus era, I counted, and I might have miscounted, plus or minus a few here, but I found that there are roughly 25 new Star Wars live action shows, animated shows, programs, documentaries, special releases. And that's kind of like been so much of the whole shebang here over this course of this time frame here, which, when you're in it for 5 years, you're like, wow, that's not a whole lot. But when you actually just like write it down on a piece of paper, you're like, holy cow, how did I manage consuming it, all this stuff? Like, that's crazy. I didn't even list out all 25 for fear of like losing my mind. But let's just talk about some like our favorites from this time frame here. Greg C, let's start with you. What have been some of your favorite projects of the Disney Plus era here?
I'll try to take it one from each of three different categories, which is, I do think among what you listed, documentaries gets ignored a little too
It
much.
certainly does. Yeah.
But there are some incredible ones. I say this as a guy who has not watched the John Williams one yet, but I'm very excited
Ooh, you got
about
to.
that.
Oh.
Yeah, it's on my list. I'll certainly get to it. But I do think the ILM documentary was incredible, and just the depth they achieved across those episodes. I don't think it broke a lot of ground in terms of new material, but in terms of drawing it together and telling us the stories and kind of filling in, I thought that was a really special one. With my kids, somewhere in the house, I have to mention Young Jedi Adventures. It's been the one that captured their attention the most, and they've loved watching. I think we've been through it like 4 or 5 times, and
Loves the nation.
well, as Greg McLaughlin knows, my 4-year-old, when we were watching Rebuild the Galaxy and Darth Nose showed up in the background, that was where she started her YouTube channel. She's like, nope, not doing it. Like this is not my Star Wars anymore. I can't take it. And then it is hard for me. I'm a giant Kenobi fan, so I want to say Kenobi was my favorite live action, but if I'm being honest, and maybe that's just the mood I'm in right now, it's Andor that I think has just become a higher
You tipped your cap
tier
earlier
of
today.
Star Wars. Yeah. Well, and who knows when we're recording, we're going to keep that secret, but maybe the news is just dropping at this moment that it's April 22nd that it's coming back. So we don't have that long to wait for when we get a little more of that story.
Yeah.
And, I think I've technically watched Kenobi the most, but Andor's the one that's on my mind and in my heart a lot of the time. So that's, for me, the best of the best.
I think Andor is in the hearts and minds of a lot of fans, according to Twitter. And also, not to brush over this, but I think I recall in a recent episode of the Breakfast Pack about rebuilding the galaxy, did you purchase perhaps a Dark
Yes.
Falcon as well?
We did. We actually just finished it earlier today. I will say, has rarely happened in my life, but one of the pieces was missing from the Lego kit, which
Oh,
Oh
so
no.
I have to mail away for it.
you have
Which
to mail
I've
away
always
for
heard
it.
they're very good. You know, you can do customer service to tell
Oh my
them
gosh.
what you're missing, but it was Dark Ray's hood. So she's
Okay.
just
Uh,
she's low botting upstairs. So but yes, it's a huge hit. My kids have not stopped playing with it, and it was a really fun build. I had built the Falcon of that scale a long time ago, although it's since been smashed and reclaimed by the Lego bin.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a really fun build. It's a great set.
Love it. What a great entryway as well for Star Wars. I know people are like, "Who is this made for?" Anyways, and I'm
mhm.
like, Greg's kids.
They love it. Yeah,
It's bringing the family
they
together.
I think they've watched it 4 times, and you know it's a solid 2 hours across those 4 episodes. So yeah,
Hey, keeps their attention, and broken into 4 parts. If they want to stop, you only have to make it through 20 minutes. So it's a great way to keep them engaged. All right, Greg M. Where what are your favorite projects of
Oh
this
my
time
goodness.
frame?
And yeah, I'll have to defer to my co-host to take questions 4 through 8, to take the load from it. So
Okay.
where you finish, how long you have him, it's completely up to you. I wash my hands of how many more hours that you'll keep him, but we just know he's good for it. So it's like, there it is until somebody complains, right? And then I go, all right, I gotta go.
Greg, we'll
Um,
still be going by the time you're done. You can hop back on
yeah,
the
you can come back
show.
on.
this is not the
Hour
first
7.
time that's happened. For reals, I was on a stream one time where I had to go, and it went so long that I got back on the stream like an hour later, and then it went for like hour 3, and I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. But it was a great stream. I would say, I in thinking back of the gallery, episodes we had Light
Mhm,
and Magic,
mhm.
but the gallery, especially for Mando, where they did
Mm,
a full season of it. And there was that one, I think it was the director's one, where Filoni and the directors that were
yeah.
doing it, and he kind of laid out that whole, Lucas and the Force and all that, and you could have heard a pin drop, because at like minute 30, which you can pull up on there, where he just kind of explains it, and like
Mhm,
you're hearing it straight from the source. I mean, obviously he worked under George, on the Clone Wars and so forth, but it's like
mhm.
he gets it. And I think that was just something where it's like, something that was kind of missing, that, Ryan Johnson had a very large, documentary on the making of The Last Jedi.
Mhm.
And I think in some aspects, the other two movies didn't really, they have extras. But here it's like when you're getting into heads and you can kind of see they're thinking of it all the time and all the work. This is why, even if you're not crazy about a Star Wars project, you still have to respect the fact that a
Mm,
lot of people who really, really love this stuff, or if
yeah.
like say, for example, like a Mark Hamill's like, well, I'm not really crazy about how he was, but it still respected the craft. And he's like, look,
Mm,
this is his vision. I'm just going to go along with it. But it's just amazing when, the gallery is one of my favorite things. And even on the Marvel side, and they have what is the name of because they have their own
oh,
version of
the
that,
assembled, yeah.
the assembled,
Yeah.
which is still great. Even like I said, even if you don't like a project, those I think were something that was just so made for Disney Plus,
Mhm.
because you're having to fill all that time,
Yeah.
and these are great, and you can fire them up. I always like, firing up like Light and Magic, or I'll go back a lot of times to the extras, of some of the films. Now what's nice is in Disney Plus, some of them do have. So I know that Blast Points just did a whole episode on the deleted scenes from Jedi, where it talked about the
Mhm.
pilots, that all of them, and of course that the older lady pilot. Sorry, I'm just that's
I
where I went
hey,
first.
love the older lady pilot episode's great.
Is
Yeah.
amazing, and you go, this is why it's like, this is what I think that the promise of is like, look, you don't have to put out shows at quite a clip. And Greg and I'd be the first to say it really was like when Mando and Bad Batch overlapped, we're like, this is a little nutty.
That was
I
crazy.
wish they
Mhm,
would
mhm.
find the throttle, like find that throttle where you could put stuff out that would, match the movies, really go well, where it's like, eventually they're going to have to find that, like, this is what makes a good TV show. This is what's going to
Mhm.
make a good movie. In between, we can put all this stuff, you know, granted the cost of it, something I'm sure you guys will get into later. It's like the bundle originally, I think, was like $15. Now it's not $15. So it's like,
Oh, it launched at
it's
$7. It was a
Yeah,
awesome
it was so
time.
yeah,
cheap.
right. For Disney Plus, for the bundle that gets you
True, yeah.
ESPN Plus and Hulu, which we still have, and I'm like, I like having that. It's a great bundle, and they're adding more to it. But it's just something where it's like, I want them to find that that happy medium that really works well, because, without Disney Plus, I don't really find Greg cast, because Greg was nice enough to go, hey, I've got an idea for a movie. Greg, would you mind doing it? And I wouldn't think, these 3 years later that we're still doing this stuff and having, and like, hey, are we doing, whether someone goes, hey, are you guys going to do? And we're like, oh yeah, we're totally going to do that. Or it's like, hey, it's been a while. And it might be that point where it's like, let's just come back and do a show on a trailer or this or that, because it's just fun being on. And then we bring people in especially with our show, we bring in people in on the community, bring yourself in.
Yeah.
Definitely more than once, totally more than once. But those are some of Disney Plus is now that tie that binds, and it does keep it from being just long gaps, movie or something, and all in between. But at any rate, I would love to tackle the rest of these. I feel bad leaving, but I know my wife is gonna be like,
hey, that is quite okay. That's quite okay. And if we're still going, just hop right back in. Who knows?
Let's leave the thing up.
But in case that doesn't happen, Greg, where can Greg M, where can the folks find you in the Rebel Base Card online?
Okay. I am not part of the big exodus off of X just yet, but I know a lot of people are going, hey, this Blue Sky thing's amazing. But you can find on Instagram, X, Hive, occasionally Threads, and whatnot, all the socials at Rebel Base Card, or on the newly skinned Star Wars Card Trader, where the 10th anniversary base is out, because next May will be 10 years. Eventually I'll get there. 10 years for Star Wars Card Trader. And that's something else that will be exciting.
Anniversaries galore.
Anniversaries galore. So it's gonna be a fun time. But yeah, a lot of good stuff on the podcast as well, including, like I said, you were a big help. And just lastly, shout out to Reactions Podcast, Aaron and David, back in the saddle. I had a chance to listen to episode 199 after Hurricane Milton did a big number. I wanted to thank you, Anthony, for coming on and helping out during the Storm Reactions ones. So
absolutely, my pleasure.
But anyway, enjoy the rest of this. I can't wait to hear the rest of what Greg has to say. And now he can say he can give you all the behind the scenes of how crazy it is on the breakfast.
Thanks so much, Greg.
Thank you.
Bye, Greg.
And now things just got a whole lot easier for me. And
he said all those nice things about me and then disappeared. So I'm going to say a bunch of mean things about him just to keep him on his toes, because you can't let your co-host get too comfy. You really can't. So.
You got to keep them on their toes. That's right. Never keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Wink, wink. For me, just to answer this question quickly, I will say that I absolutely adored Obi-Wan Kenobi. It sounds like you were in the special screening that they did at Celebration as well.
Okay.
I was there too.
Nice.
So always fun to hear that other people were in the auditorium at the same time. I'm always finding out, like, oh, these people that I didn't really know back then are now like percolating into my sphere. And I'm like, oh, you were probably 2 rows away from me. So that is cool. And I want to say probably my most favorite moment of the Disney Plus era, I think, will be that Mandalorian season 2 finale. The return of Luke Skywalker into the mix was spectacular. I will say that we've talked a little bit about they did a couple gallery episodes now at this point about the deep fake. I feel dumber every time watching it. So it's one of those where it has the adverse effect, where sometimes you watch something and you're like, okay, that was explained to me well, I get it. But every time I turn that on thinking I'm going to have a different outcome, I come out on the other side going, I need an advanced degree for this. This isn't my bag. So those are great. And I will just say Bad Batch has been spectacular. It's my wife's favorite Star Wars project. It's what she would define as her Star Wars. So the fact that we were able to bond over that and have those great conversations surrounding that show is something that I will cherish forever. So amidst all that, let's just say there's been a ton and something for everybody in the Disney Plus era of not just Star Wars alone. I mean, we had Willow. I say had because it was there and gone. Yeah, I know it worked for a lot of people and it didn't work for some. And again, that's okay. To your likes, teach their own. We now the only theatrical thing of this era was Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny, which I know you are a big fan of, Greg.
Huge fan.
Is now on Disney Plus. So people that didn't get a chance to see it in the theaters, which I know you all didn't because it didn't hit super high numbers at the box office. You can stream that for your leisure at home. So a lot of stuff for everybody in Lucasfilm. I'm glad that they have been kind of not just been sequestered to only Star Wars during this time frame, as Disney was like, feed the content machine. We need more. We need more.
Mm.
And now we'll talk about this, I think, later on. But now it seems like they're like, no, do less, do less. We did too
Yeah.
much. So I ask you, Greg, this next question here. What do you think have been some of like the positive outcomes that you've witnessed from this expansive nature? And I say expansive because we just talked about 25 plus projects that are on this this app now over 5 years. I mean, if you break it down, it's like 5 things per year that have come out,
Yeah.
which is wild.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're not asking me to say this, but I'm channeling Dan Zaire and thinking of like my one word answer to this would just be expansive, right? Like the fact that that Star Wars on Disney Plus has included all those great live action programs, all those documentaries,
Mm.
and then something down to Visions, which is like
Yeah. Oh
global
my gosh.
and
Forgot. How could I
draws
forget?
in, yeah, and it draws in all these audience people who aren't a part of Star Wars fandom. It really is, it coincided with the pandemic in ways that really helped Disney Plus become big, I think, but it really did demonstrate that we could still have a little bit of a monoculture, that there could be a way that there could be events that would draw us all together.
Mm.
And the ways in which you're seeing kind of Marvel slumping in popularity and Star Wars is sputtering seems to coincide with the fact that like we're back out in the world and we're not all sitting in our homes
Yeah.
enjoying the Disney Plus content stream. But I think Star Wars needs to be huge. If it's gonna I mean, I think it's guaranteed to outlive us, but if it's gonna continue
I hope
on
so.
till the end, yeah. But if it's gonna continue on, it's gotta attract more and more people. And I think about Grogu in particular, and my wife puts up with my Star Wars. She doesn't love my Star Wars, but she had work friends who were like, didn't fall into any stereotype that you would assume was a Star Wars fan, buying Grogu merch. And like I mean, every time I'm on the highway, I see a Grogu sticker, whether it's baby on board or some other version. I got lost a little while ago, and I realized I was following a car that just had a big "This is the way," and I'm like, all right, that's a sign from the Force. I'm just following this car that assume that he knows
Wherever
where
they
he's
go,
going.
I'm with them.
Yep. A clan of 2, your car and my car. So yeah, it's been kind of incredible that it's so expansive, and you and Greg both alluded to this. It's been a huge shot in the arm of fandom. And I think if it had not been present, I think we would have seen people not make any dramatic statements about leaving fandom, but kind of drifting away. And I do think after Revenge of the Sith, which was a similar moment, we saw people drift away. And then Clone Wars, you often hear people tell their Star Wars story, and it's like, well, Clone Wars was on for like 3 years, and I just assumed it was dumb. And then I tried it, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And I once it got
An
to
all too
Netflix, I
common
watched
statement.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we would have seen one of those moments, and instead we just saw it keep growing. The podcast, or sorry, the Instagram feed, it's Star Wars This Is Podcasting, I believe, where it tracks the anniversary of all the podcasting. And he just posted, he's like, we're about to hit a huge month of 5th and anniversaries, and I think it's this, right?
This and Rise of Skywalker in December.
Yeah. And so it's all these people who took this moment to jump into fandom and find an expansive way forward with that. And again, it's what we all needed for the pandemic, is a way to, build these connections and to find our community. And it's crazy that your prompt here and is reminding me as well that like it's been 5 years since we had a Star Wars movie, which is nuts. But it would have been so easy for the fandom to just completely fall apart in that time. And I would say, despite recent, there's always going to be conflicts, there's always going to be fights over something, but I would say it's as strong as it's ever been in my lifetime. And my fandom misses the initial OT bump, which is probably when percentage wise it was the most popular or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, like, I like what you're saying here. This is an expansive and positive time. I think this is, in hindsight, this is, we're also approaching that 5-year anniversary of the COVID-19 as well, which I don't think people can discount how much Disney Plus was impactful during, especially those initial few months of like, I need to feel community. Fandom is here for me. I can watch this show almost conceivably at the same time as everybody, and then go online and chat about it and feel like I'm connected to people in some way. Oh, I can pull up so many podcasts, because a lot of people started podcasts because of the Disney Plus era. You're sitting on one right now that was started in this era, right? So I was like, okay, there's enough content that I can talk about something weekly without it feeling stale or anything like that, and have a good, fun conversation about something. To feel that connection to folks that people desperately need, and in a time when people were like, please stay inside. People wanted escapism too, and
Yeah.
they found that outlet in the great space opera that is Star Wars, whether it be watching the movies that are now available to easily stream on those platforms with the McClunky and all. We're at 5 years of McClunky. Holy cow!
5
I didn't
years of
even.
McClunky.
Oh man, the greatest gift ever. Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
oh man. What, we should have just titled this episode "5 Years of McClunky." Forget Disney Plus. Wow.
Uh,
All
there's a
that fun
there's a
stuff.
s-
Yeah.
there's a Star Wars Unlimited card called McClunky, and
Is
it was the
there?
first time I'd ever seen it really spelled out. And I was like, "That's how you spell McClunky?" So that was my recent
McClunky.
revelation. I can't
Oh
remember
man.
it off the top of my head, but people can find a picture of that card online, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Find that card. I'll tell you, that's a treasure trove right there. And yeah, this is I will forever be grateful and thankful for this era because of feeding the need to feed the machine. I think and or fear slash worry that the projects that we got during this time frame may not have happened in a non-pandemic, non-Disney Plus world. Right. I'm thinking of things like Book of Boba Fett, which I know some people loved it, some people didn't like it. I personally really liked it. And to get a story about Boba in that setting with Tim Morrison back in the role, spectacular. Obi-Wan Kenobi may not have gotten that. I know that was an idea percolating before in movie form,
Yeah.
but there could never get agreement on what it was, what it was going to be. It was going to live in development problems forever. Ahsoka, like they were able to take these chances on character. Finish the Clone Wars. We're
Yeah.
finishing the Clone
Yeah.
Wars was a thing that came out of this era. So the need to feed the beast was, I think, to our fandom's benefit as people that have really enjoyed, a vast majority of the stuff that's come out,
Yeah.
and expanded on everything, because now the Mandalorian universe is creating its own pockets of things. Like, you don't get Skeleton Crew if the Mando isn't successful and popular and a thing.
Yeah, and it seems like it will be the driving force about getting us back to theaters. I mean, it's a
And
little unclear
exactly,
still at this
it's
point,
ironic.
but it seems like that'll be the next time. And it almost has become this minor league that now, when something really hits and they figure out that it works, they're going to find a way
Mhm.
to put it up in the majors, and so that's exciting.
Hey, and it's interesting. Yeah, we'll talk about, I think, some of like the lessons and all that stuff from this. But um, I think just in general, the Disney Plus era, Disney Plus especially, never could figure out its footing of like when to release something, what time
Mm.
to release something. Do we do it at 9 p.m. Eastern time on a weeknight? Do we release it on Friday? Do we release it on Wednesday? We can't have Marvel and Lucasfilm competing at the same time.
Yeah,
Now let's try them competing at the same time and see if we drop two things at once, if people will love it. We have other stuff too. Jeff Gold, like, stuff isn't getting beyond a second season if it gets a second season, right?
yeah,
These are all the things that have happened during these last 5 years that I think are big questions of just the streaming wars in general, not even just Disney Plus, Lucasfilm, but we're talking also during this time frame. Peacock launched, Max launched, I'm sure I'm missing like 15 other
Paramount Plus.
Paramount
Yeah,
Plus, yeah,
yeah,
15 other
yeah.
streaming services that were like, all right, we're going to specialize our niche here in the mold of what Netflix has created. And it seems like, based off of math and all that stuff, that Disney Plus is really the only one veering towards somewhat level of profitability in this time frame. And I wonder if it's because of those driving IPs that they're getting to that point. But now they're seeming like they're switching back to slowing down content on that side. Let's move things back to the cinema. Will it transition back again maybe in the future? I don't know. But as a fan during this time frame, keeping up with it, it kind of felt exhausting trying to be like, all right, I'm too in the know of the business of everything here, and perhaps
Mm.
that was a downside to the discourse of being online when it comes to this stuff, because I wanted to be successful so much that I invested so much time and space in that. I don't know. What do you have any thoughts on that one before we move on?
Yeah, well, again, it's a mystery when we're recording. But I will say, we just had a big announcement this week, and I'm just going to be completely honest in my response here. So, a big announcement that there's probably a trilogy brewing under Simon Kinberg.
Yeah.
And my honest reaction as one of the world's biggest Star Wars fans, I was like, "Oh, all right, we'll see."
Yeah, I
And
had the
like,
same reaction. Yep. I was
and
like,
it's like,
okay.
it's not that I wouldn't love it, and I would be there 5 times in the first 24 hours, but it's like so much of this has become promises that feel like they don't get met. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's more
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying, which is that these things get announced too early because they have to be proving that people should stay subscribed to these services, or they have to be proving that,
Mm-hmm.
they're active, on the IP. And so all of us who are way too much online, we hear all that, we get all that information. And then when it falls apart, it's kind of just the way the film industry has always worked, but
A
it feels
lifetime
like
of
a
that. Yeah.
broken promise, or it feels like, if you're on YouTube, it feels like Kathleen Kennedy came to your home and stole your Blu-rays or something. But it really
Cue the
is
red
just,
eyes
yeah.
thumbnails.
So but it really is just how the film industry works. And I think those of
Mhm.
us who are in these spaces and kind of creating the news, we feed into it, right? I mean, we're not innocent in that problem, even if you're kind of in a positive space within that. But it's hopeful to me that as everything you just said is exactly right. Everybody's slowing down,
Mhm.
and nobody's thinking that this is really profitable. It's always interesting to me because the trend all the companies are fighting is people who sign on for 1 month or 2 months and then quit when they've used up
Mhm.
their, whatever the show
It's a
was.
free trial.
And
Yeah.
yeah, free trial. And then yeah, it's like, oh, House of the Dragon's over. I'll drop Max for 3 months and pick it up again when the next show starts. And it's so funny to me in the context of Disney Plus in particular, because I mean, I'm a parent. Like, I will own Disney Plus forever, even if I mean, I watch enough,
Moana
but
will
it's like,
always be on.
yeah, if my kids didn't have hot and cold running Bluey, I would not be surviving right now. So it is really interesting how we react to those trends, but we are almost in a separate category than a
Mhm.
lot of the like
Mhm.
general public. Like, other 20 something, 30 something, I'm sure they're popping on when, oh, Agatha's good. I'll get a 1 month and binge it all once it comes out, as
Yeah.
opposed to let's make sure we're there every Tuesday night at 9. People probably don't even know that the way we know that, right?
I know. Man, could you imagine living in a world that's not like driven by the release schedule of something?
Yeah.
Oh
On Long
man.
Take, we call those people normies, and it always sounds a little rude, but it's really like, no, they are just normal
They
compared
are
to
normal.
us,
That's
right?
right.
They are the normal is the positive name, not the obsessives, not the total nerds. So
Yeah, you're telling me you don't have your Thursday night planned already for the advanced showing of X movie coming out in 2 weeks? Like,
yeah.
what a life to live. Yeah, yeah, interesting, good stuff here. So we kind of we alluded to this earlier here in
Mm,
the conversation. So I wanted to talk about like the possibility and quality, I should say, of having live action Star Wars on the small screen. Something that Lucas tried to do, and he couldn't get it up and running famously after Revenge of the Sith. And now with Disney Plus, we have this, and as well as other technology that have made it happen. And I don't think it would be possible without the advent of what we call the volume, aka stagecraft. After all these years now, what is your opinion of stagecraft? Because I know people have had many thoughts over these last 5 years about it. Go, Google the volume and or go on X or whatever it is, and then just quote the volume and see what people say about it. Um, but have your opinions changed at all about this since that
mm.
first episode of The Mandalorian? I mean, we knew about it going into that first episode. We'd seen the trailer. I think from the summer of D23, August. At that point, they announced they did the first Mandalorian trailer for that, so we had some glimpses of it. And then the first episode launches, and then we've had at least 14 or so projects, Star Wars alone probably, that have used the volume, and I know many other things, both theatrical and for uh, the small streaming screen, have utilized the volume for other means. But what are your thoughts on it currently, and have it changed at all?
Yeah, well, I feel like I shouldn't even talk and just let you talk because you got to go in one at the more recent
I
D23,
know,
which,
I know.
I've been following your social medias being like, "How he's somewhere even cooler now. How is that possible?" And then you pop on the episodes and you're like, "Hey, I don't know what the news is because I'm still traveling." I'm like, "That son of a gun. He's out. He's at Disneyland, Paris right now." I think it's been a really interesting kind of development because part of me believes if they'd never told us about it, they
Mhm.
could still be using it for everything and
Mm.
people wouldn't have really known
Mm.
because I never heard a complaint about the appearance of the first season of Mando, I
Yeah.
would say. And then the galleries come out, which are great, and they should show off this technology and they need to advance the industry. It's really innovative and really incredible. But then you started to hear those complaints, and I myself, when you get into season 2 and I think especially season 3, you're looking at a shot and you're like, "There's the line. There's where the
Mhm.
LEDs on the
Mhm.
wall meet there." Or, they put those boxes right there because that's the end of the set, and then it's expanding into the virtual space. And I think that I mean it's the old metaphor. They showed us how the trick works, and so then we
Mm.
don't believe in the magic anymore, and we don't
Yeah.
believe in how it's working. But then as they move into Andor and the Acolyte, then the line becomes, and we didn't use it. And it's very much that all practical effects kind of mindset.
Yeah.
I think it's that pendulum is too far the other way now. So I only was really bothered by it. If I'm again, your listeners are my best friends, so I'll be completely honest. That I only was really bothered by it in Thor: Love and Thunder. That was
Mhm.
the one
Okay.
time I was like, "This does not look good," and I honestly don't know if it's that movie had to do some late reshoots or they
Yeah.
rushed something, or it was just the fact that it was on I'm sure I saw it in an IMAX theater, and it's giant, and I don't know if that had an effect,
Sure.
but that was the one time I was like, "These people are not anywhere real ever," as a part of that, and, again, my best friends, your listeners know this, but I see just about every new movie that comes out. Like I'm at the theater maxing out my AMC Stubs membership, I think
That's
every
right.
week since early May. So like I see everything, and there's a lot of really bad movies out there and a lot of really bad effects. And when somebody complains about the volume, I always think it's a scapegoat issue. It's like, well, you're not thinking about the effects if the story's really good and if the characters are really driving you.
Mhm.
It's kind of classic film studies, right? Like if everything is working, then you don't care about the technique. It's only when things start to fall apart that you are concerned about that. I think you said it right. Like we would not have this. We couldn't get this literally scripted. It was scripted in the 2000s, and they couldn't find a budget to make it work. And good old Rick McCallum just had to retire at some of the locations he was scouting for
Mhm.
that show, and just faded into the mists of time, cursing, I'm sure, because that's his brand. But
Yep.
and so
He's calling up
we'll
Ewan and telling him,
yeah,
yeah.
that's true. And I mean, the incredible people worked on that. Like every once in a while, somebody new comes out. I was like, yeah, I went
Mhm.
up for a few weeks and did some touch up on it. You're like, man, it must have been incredible. But I think it will. I think it has worked well, and we've gotten what we've gotten because of it. I don't mind it in Kenobi. People all the time say, "Oh, Kenobi's too volume."
Oh,
Hey,
man.
if that's what it took to get all that put together, and the chills I still feel when Ewan is holding up all those rocks, even if they're all fake behind him on a screen, I don't care. They look
They were
amazing,
always gonna
and
be fake. I can tell you that,
yeah,
folks. He
yeah,
was never gonna
exactly
lift
right.
it.
So yeah, I'm not somebody who's going to complain about that, but I think it becomes too much of a scapegoat issue, and I
Agreed.
suspect it'll be like the CG of the prequels. Nobody's
Yeah.
complaining about that anymore, or if they are, it's because they watched it in
They wanna complain about
2000.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, and they've never changed their talking points, and they think they're still relevant in the present day. So, but I'm right in remembering you actually got to step onto one of these.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. That was the big draw at D23 this past August. So again, to the listeners and to you, Greg, I pull out the plea. We should make this a second Star Wars celebration every other year. Everyone
mm,
should come out to D23 and flood the Lucasfilm Pavilion that they have, because I think it's only going to get better. I mean,
yeah.
if this is the stuff they can pull out for a random Disney convention where they're not even the main focal point, who knows what the future can hold? I mean, they brought up Manny Jacinto to have a full conversation with Kristen Baver as just a panel conversation, and Vanessa Marshall and other folks. I mean, they used the volume as a like a second monitor screen. It was crazy. Like they were just doing a PowerPoint presentation with all the slides behind them, and it was just they were using it as a computer screen. I'm like, come on now. They actually the one panel they did was the Rebuild the Galaxy. They had the showrunners come out and talk about the show, and they announced the cast for that using the volume too. But they showed the trailer on the volume, so we got to watch it. So I kind of felt like in the Obi-Wan Kenobi documentary about the making of it that they
so
did,
good.
where it shows Hayden and Ewan watching literally scenes from the prequels. I felt like that was me, but I'm watching the trailer for Rebuild the Galaxy. I know people have gripes about it. I feel like if that's I sometimes we live in this era and this world of just because I have a microphone and I'm on a podcast, I feel like I need to be a critic rather than just saying I like this thing and I don't need to justify like anything that I think they can improve on, or I need to say something that I hate. So I think that the volume became a buzz point for people to be like, I can't 100% like something. I need to show that I'm not a full. I have some criticism here. So I feel like they forced themselves in some ways to be like, okay, this is the one area where I can be okay with saying that I didn't like this, whereas still sounding like I love the episode overall though. So I feel like like you said, it got scapegoated a little bit there, and if really the volume is your impetus for not liking something, then I think you just didn't like the show overall. I don't think the volume, whether it was done in the volume or it was done on a practical live set, was going to change the story at all. The story was going to be the same, and it's just a visual enhancer, a means by which to get to the end of the thing here. I think that, and now it's becoming a question of, and again, we are way too in as a fandom, we are way too into the business of all things, right? Oh, the Acolyte's $185 million budget. I was like, of course it did. It had 8 episodes. Why would it not have $185 million budget? I mean, 8 episodes of roughly 50 minutes each, let's round up to an hour. It's 8 hours. Why would you go to the movie theater and it's a two-hour movie? It's a $200 million budget for a lot of these big action blockbusters. Why would it not have a comparable budget with all these actors and people working more on these things? Like if we really knew the true budgets for all these things, I think people would lose their minds about this kind of stuff. And they're like, well, maybe they should have used the volume. It maybe would have gotten a second season. And like, I don't think the volume was the indicator at the end of all things. Like they would have greenlit a second season and said use it in the volume if they really wanted to, and told them rein it in here on this front. So there are other reasons why outside of that. So I think, and then having seen it myself, I'll just get back to that point here. Seeing is believing. They did a whole presentation with us, people in the audience kind of explaining how it works and the system of it all. And then they would show us various scenes over the last 5 years that they've used the volume for in both film and television, and be like, all right, point it out to us. You guys think you're so smart. Tell us where the line is. What's real and what's not. And then people will be like, okay, I think it's this and this and this. And then Rob Reedow from Chief Officer of ILM would be like, wrong. Here's where the line actually is. And then it kind of brought the idea back home, and it's like, okay, maybe we don't know as much as we think we do. Maybe these people with PhDs and created this impressive technology are a bit smarter than we are, and maybe we should let the people do the thing that they are paid to do and create the stuff and just enjoy it on the other end and critique it for it as we see it. So that's where I will land on that one. And but they did note that the people are becoming aware of it, and that drives them to continually find new ways to be innovative to outsmart the person at home. So I just want to plug that for people that are currently listening to this and maybe are like, I hate the volume. It was the worst invention ever. Perhaps you are in this circle right now where you're currently being out tricked by the thing that you're watching, thinking you have it correctly, but you're actually not. So yeah, I think it revolutionized.
Not your listeners. Again,
not
they're
our
my
listeners.
best friends.
No,
They're
exactly.
too good. Yeah.
I will tell you though, I think having actually seen the volume in person, seeing it in all the panels that they did, I think that we are limiting ourselves in terms of the creativity of the volume. And what I say by that is like the possibilities of this thing are almost limitless when it comes to immersion. So I'm thinking like I don't know how on what scale, but in the future, using this technology, if it's on a smaller scale in classrooms, it could be ways for kids to like go on field trips without actually having to go to the
Wow.
other side of the world and like feel like you're in this historic place or be immersed in this book or something like that and be so wrapped up in the story that you are. Yeah, I can't imagine where it can go in the future here, and that's the most exciting thing at all about the volume, in my opinion. So I think just be on the lookout for. And I don't think as people that aren't in that sphere, we know truly where it could go with the possibilities of it all, which is so exciting for me personally.
Yeah.
So that's where I
Same.
leave the volume on that one. So we kind of talked a little bit about the slowing down of everything, and I ask you, uh, is there such a thing as too much Star Wars? Have we? I feel like listing 25 different projects, we have more Star Wars in these 5 years than in the 40 plus 42 years of Star Wars that led up to that moment combined. um, so, have we been over inundated with Star Wars? Is there too much supply and has demand gone down because of that? Are we having diminishing returns on things because of that? Is that why we've seen people have an exodus from fandom, or is there too many variables as well that are factoring into that may be driving people away from it? And is Star Wars just the scapegoat of like I can take this out of my life while everything else is collapsing around me?
The dog in the room on fire is throwing
Yes,
his
I'm
Luke
fine.
Skywalker action figure down. But uh, yeah, I mean, it's so tough. And one thing I do like to always point out, because you do hear this complaint inside of fandom, but it's not that Star Wars is the one thing they're slowing down on. It's
Yeah,
everything at
everything.
Disney and it's every streaming company. Netflix is by far the best and most
They're slowing
successful.
down too.
They're slowing way down. There's a lot of fandoms getting disappointed without that season 2 or season 3, whatever the case may be. And I think what it is streaming had this incredible promise that if we could really get every household subscribed and they would stay subscribed all the time, we would have
Mhm,
incredible
mhm.
budgets. But it involved a huge outlay of money. My favorite streaming service actually in terms of quality, like the hit rate, is Apple TV Plus, and they just spend and spend and spend because
Hey,
there's no
yeah, they're not afraid to spend.
downside. Yeah, yeah. So, and they get incredible talent and, all those categories, and it's like, I think because everybody was competing in that moment, the budgets just
Mhm,
ballooned
mhm.
to try to win over these, and I think it was never gonna sustain at that level, but I do think it generally fell a little further than almost any executive saw it coming,
Yeah.
and that's where it is. So that being said, is I do think the moment for me, and Greg referenced it in one of his comments before he just ran off to go buy a pack of smokes or something, is, there was that moment where a Bad Batch season overlapped with a Mando season, and and I'm sure there was a Marvel season
Oh,
somewhere in the
and
mix
Willow was just
somewhere there
before
too.
that too, so they were
Yeah,
overlapping.
that's right. So and that just felt like that's getting to the point where it's too much because it's just true in fandom that it's not like, must see TV in the 90s where you'd watch your Friends and your Seinfeld and whatever show they stuck in between that they were hoping would become a
Mhm,
hit but never did. You just never like you would just watch them all and be fine. But fandom wants the time to pause and digest and record podcasts and post blogs and
mhm,
yell at the people who posted blogs and yell at the people who posted podcasts and just kind of debate and fund it out. And so when you got to that level of multiple episodes each week, I think that really hurt. The pace we're at now might be a little too slow for my personal taste.
yeah.
You know, I'm looking at the last 3 months, and I had a great time with Acolyte over the summer, and then there was a long pause before we got really Agatha as the next Marvel
Mhm,
project in the mix there, and then kind of now that Agatha is wrapped up, we've got a solid month in between the end of that and the start of Skeleton Crew, and
hey, you got
not
music
every
by
fan.
John Williams to tie you over?
Oh, that's right. I've gotta get to that. I'm just shocked I haven't yet. It's more a comment on my busy week. But it absolutely shows that, like, the gaps in between, that's when I'm tempted to unsubscribe or when I don't
Mhm,
think
mhm.
about Disney Plus, for a little while. I think it's I think it's a pendulum. I already used the pendulum metaphor, but it was way too far one way, and I think they've now swung back, and it's maybe a little too light. And
Hmm.
so I suspect we'll hear a little bit more. But it is not a great time to be a giant mega entertainment company. Movie
That's true.
revenues are down, television ratings are down. Nothing's going exactly right. Never mind the strikes, and I mean some of
Oh my
those
gosh,
budgets you
yeah.
mentioned. Indiana Jones and the Dial of
And the
Destiny,
pandemic
cinematic
too, yeah.
masterpiece, gets hammered for its budget, but a huge amount of that was the COVID protocols. They
Hmm.
were, coming
And
back
they had
as
to
a
take
production.
breaks.
Yeah, right, with injuries and so on. So it gets hammered, and we know too much, and we say, "Oh, it's not profitable," and like, we shouldn't care about that. We should care about great
Hmm.
art, great stories, and that's where we should land. But I think the fire hose coming down a little bit is meaningful, and it's
Hmm.
worthwhile. And I find myself feeling that way in the height of one of these seasons. And I see my podcast queue as like, easily 10 to 15 hours covering the same 40-minute television show.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, let's pick Anthony this week, and then we'll pick Blast Points next
Hmm.
week, and then we'll pick Sky Talkers the week after, right? Like, to
Right.
try to pace myself, because I do think you have to find your own limits, and Disney's trying to figure out how to do that as well. How do you feel? I mean, you're trying to cover it all. Is it too
Well,
much for you?
I'll tell you first off to your point here, and like the list of like episodes that you get in your feed after a new thing drops is also like, I don't know about you, but I wait until after I record to then
Right,
listen to what other
same.
people do, just so like you couldn't say like, oh, you said the same thing. It's like I literally did the best I could to not
Yeah.
be influenced by anyone else. And then it's like, holy cow, I have to now listen to all these before next week. Otherwise, I'll have two now. All these episodes, double the episodes that are in my feed. It's crazy. But as someone that tries and covers everything, I think it's helpful that we only focus on Star Wars stuff. Well,
Mm.
obviously we do Indiana Jones and Willow and all that stuff, and that was where it got troublesome because I was like, do I release 2 episodes a week? Do I do both episodes in one episode? I don't know. So that was a lot of kind of like soul searching on the podcast here to see what worked for me and my schedule. So at the same time of grad school and doing all that, that wasn't the best, for me overall. But I think now that that's done, I've got that degree. It's a bit easier to bring on the 2 episodes a week. I'll take it, and we'll go at that rate. But if I were like a Disney, I know a lot of like people in the Disney podcast sphere that are covering like everything Disney movies and parks and Disney Plus TV shows. They are like drowning.
Yeah.
And there's an extent of like I have too much content to talk about. Holy cow, what is my niche then? So although people are like, how do you talk about something in Star Wars every week? I'm like, it's actually a bit easier than you think.
Mm,
I've got
mm.
a even the whiteboard. I got
Yeah, yeah.
the whiteboards.
Plan.
Every time I take something off, something else comes back on there. You finish one thing and then Skeleton Crew comes up next week and you're like, okay, great, I gotta do a prep episode for that. I gotta do each week, I gotta find out the guests and all that. So I will say I think that Star Wars was always a fine level of enough for me. I never felt overwhelmed or inundated by Star Wars alone, but I felt overwhelmed by everything throwing
Mm,
out like, oh, here's a season of this show, here's a season of this show, here's a season of this show. And then I felt like, okay, it's too much. Now I need to figure out what are the shows that I actually like the most and what can I cut out and all that stuff, right? With every streaming service trying to win the streaming wars, they all kind of threw spaghetti against the wall and was like, oh, what's gonna stick with these audiences? Okay, we've got these IPs. Let's see if someone's into all this and we'll watch that. And for a while there, I tried keeping up with all of that, and then at a certain point, as a fan, I had to say, okay, great, I'm not going to watch that Gremlins TV show. I got to cut a line somewhere here. This is not it.
yeah, yeah,
um, so I know today, like go on X or Instagram or something like that, you hear an announcement like, okay, this is now a series coming and all that. And I'm like, okay, great. First off, we'll see if it happens.
yeah,
So
yeah,
much gets announced these days. I think, because these, and that's a whole other conversation, is the media coverage of film and television is more
yeah.
so like scoop based than ever. And everyone wants to get that exclusive scoop and the first to publish something like no new shows have been announced. And then, all right, great, you're on this train again. Let's see if it actually happens. And then if it does come to fruition, I'm like, okay, do I do I actually like that IP that much? Or did I just watch it because it was either a thing of the moment, or did I just want to feel included in potential conversations at the workplace or among my friends and all
Yeah.
that stuff? Because, like, I'll be honest, first season of House of Dragon, I didn't watch it for like a year. It took-
Yeah.
I didn't feel compelled to. I just was like, I'm still kind of feeling down after Game of Thrones ended. Do I want to dive back into that world? And I just did it slowly but surely, and I didn't feel like I was spoiled entirely to the entire season by that point, and that's a whole other conversation too about people spoiling
Mm.
everything the second it comes out, which may a whole other thing, folks. But I did, you have to pick and choose. And
Yeah.
I said Star Wars is my bread and butter. I like Marvel too, so I'll probably be second under that umbrella. And those are the things that I'll keep up with most. And if I have time for something else, then I'll pencil that in the schedule. But I think just everyone just got so oversaturated with everything during this time
Yeah.
frame that you had to healthily pick a way to do that. And somehow, much like Palpatine, we Greg McLaughlin has found his way back onto the show. So now we've got two Gregs. Oh, he was here for a second. I don't know. We'll probably get him back in a second.
Somebody opened
Here.
his laptop, but
Yes. Okay. Here we're back on again, and Greg. It seems like once you're tuned in, Greg, you're back. Look,
I'm back.
it's happening live, folks. We told you this would happen. We're still up and running. We only got
Greg,
to
and I just
question
saw his
6.
biggest fan behind him. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
You can see right out there. What I missed.
So you only missed 2 questions. I'll be honest. So I'm gonna throw a hardball question back at you here.
Tracks. That really tracks. only two.
Greg M, now that you're back on the podcast here, I want to just throw this quick one back at you. Is there such a thing as too much Star Wars? Have we reached the level where we're oversaturated perhaps in this 5 years, and that's why we're slowing down on this stuff? What do you think is perhaps a correct balance of Star Wars in the streaming world?
I do think when there were, when you had the gaps between the original films or the prequels and not much in between, I did like the buildup. I do think that Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
benefits from kind of the hype train. And we did see that between like Solo and Last Jedi, where I don't think Solo got the fair shake
It did not. I can tell you that.
we did get a Denny's menu, thank God. Thank you, Kyle.
You got a
for giving me
Super
the
Bowl
menu,
trailer too.
Yeah.
trailer. But I do think that Marvel kind of found that, that the longer you go and the more connections that you make, I think people kind of do check out after a while where it's like, I can't keep up. I don't know what's going on. And so I do think when I was thinking back earlier about, having, having a nice, you know, relationship between the movies and the TV show. It's like, all right, maybe just like with Resistance, what it was trying to do for, between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, where it was kind of giving you a little in between, but it wasn't really
Mm-hmm.
hurting anything, and you didn't really have to know too much because, like any series, they have to introduce the characters, and maybe that's what we're going to kind of get with Skeleton Crew, where it's loosely tied. There's a couple characters you recognize, but it's just an adventure in and of itself, and I think it has to kind of live and
Mm-hmm.
thrive in and of itself. Otherwise, if it's just these connective ones, it's like, oh, I have to go see Ant-Man 3 because it's going to show me, I have to wait 2 hours
Yeah.
and then see the after credit scene, when really we could have really missed Ant-Man 3 and not really just gone on YouTube afterwards. We would have saved ourselves a lot of trouble. No, I'm just kidding. But I do think that it does help when there is a gap. I don't think that it was Disney Plus for doing themselves any favor by, for example, Bad Batch and Mando going overlapping, because I'm like, there's just so much going on, and we're lucky that we don't get that dump of shows like Stranger Things, where it's like, oh, we're just
Mm-hmm.
going to put this all out and everybody's got to go through it, and then because even with like Greg and I were doing Rebuilding the Galaxy, we really I spaced it out, but it all happened, but it was just one of those things where you're like, it would have been nicer maybe had it been spaced out a little more, or at least between the
Mm-hmm.
parts 1 and 2 and 2 and 3.
Yeah.
But it's fine if they take breaks. I know they have to keep making money, and and that's the only reason we're going to get new stuff. But it's not, you don't necessarily have to pound me with it, because it's like there's only so many hours in the day.
That's true. That's true. Greg C, that brings up a good question here that I want to ask is, how do you think is the best way to market these kind of shows? And again, and that's kind of like in the conversation of they're still trying to figure out they never could figure out the best way to do something in this era. Releasing it on this date, releasing it on this date, releasing all at the same time, releasing 1 week at a time. What I go back to perhaps like Kenobi, right? Which I feel like it was like a month out, and then they dropped all this news on us in the trailer, and it was kind of almost silence until like a month before Celebration, and they're like, all right, 2-episode premiere on this date, here's the trailer, and that's all you're getting. Here's a couple stills, and now Obi-Wan, Ewan and Hayden are on the trail, doing all the interviews and the podcasts and all that stuff like that. Should they have marketed these shows more like movies, perhaps, and have done a longer, bigger build up for these things, just so that maybe the normies perhaps would have caught on a bit more and joined the fandom in ways that perhaps they typically don't?
It's a really good question, because I don't have a marketing degree, though the question suggests I should. I will say that I think it is hard, because they're constantly playing this game of they have to get fans amped up, but the
Mhm.
more you amp them up with the wrong kind of too much speculation, then the expectations go sky high, and
Yeah.
then nothing can live up to those, and it kind of all falls apart when it finally premieres. And I don't know the right balance to that, but to me it seems like the really early announcements don't work. I think
Mm.
those make it too easy to then say somebody is screwed up because it all fell apart. I mean, I would still love to see the Rogue Squadron movie, but you remember they put Patty Jenkins in a suit and had her rollerblading on a runway, and like it's kind of incredible to think that that was that level of production into announcing this thing that was years out at that time and seems to now
Mhm.
be not on the table. Who knows? I don't have any insider scoops. So I think that's a problem. But then at the same time, so Greg, while you were gone, I referenced this announcement this week of Simon Kinberg maybe doing a trilogy. Lucasfilm didn't announce that. They'll get blamed.
Mm.
You announced he was
Mm-hmm.
doing that, and they didn't. Somebody thought they had a scoop and they leaked it. So I think they've been burned in both directions on that. There's still a page somewhere on StarWars.com that announces Rian Johnson's trilogy, which I'd love to see, but I don't think it's gonna happen.
I
I
still
think
watch the announcement video from time to time.
I mean, I think that trilogy is called the Knives Out trilogy. He went ahead and went and made that. So,
Yeah.
but I'll take that. That's totally fine. So I think they get a lot of flack they don't deserve, and yet
Mhm.
they don't. They also get some flack they do deserve about
Yeah.
marketing in these ways. The thing that's concerned me the most lately is these reports out that they have like a secret council of fans telling them what real fans want. That is deeply upsetting to me, because I think they're following the wrong channels on YouTube and
Mm.
collecting people who should not be weighing in on that stuff. Well, and I have another thought, but I see question number 8, so I'm gonna save it for number 8, because
Okay, great.
it's better for that.
And Greg, don't spoil it, because we are the secret council that Lucasfilm
We're
has,
the
has
the
hired.
the cabal starts and ends right here. That's right. Yeah, I got get Patty Jenkins on the phone. No, but it's also at this point, I think it's like, just when you have something that's in production, go ahead. Because yeah, I think at this
Mhm.
point they have said so much, and I'm like, I think we just want it to be good. Like,
Yeah.
take your time, get the people, do whatever you can. And I have faith. I'm like, I'll enjoy Star Wars no matter what. But I'm like, yeah, you don't trip over yourself trying to think that that's going to please me. Obviously, you have things like the stock price and the company. You've got people you've got to answer to. But I'm like, just when you got something solid and you go. But I do like the fact that if you're going to tell a story, let a person
Mhm.
with a track record have at it, and then that way you don't have, you don't have to go back and forth. You don't have to like make it up later. And then that way,
Mhm.
if they give you the whole story, I mean, heck, even George didn't have the complete story. he did have to rewrite parts of it, but it's
Depends.
like,
It depends what time you ask George.
yeah, it depends
Fair,
what
fair.
interview they're talking to George in. But I like I said, I just wanted to, I just want to be happy, and I'd like to see as many Star Wars fans happy as possible, because
Hmm.
that way it's much more fun to talk about when everybody's more into it. Kind of like, when Disney Plus started, 5 years ago, and how everybody was blown away with Mando. And I think you still, even the fans that really are like, no, 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 they're like, yeah, but Mando season one was okay, and you're like, yeah, that's the magic you want to try to capture again.
I agree. I'm hoping that we get back to those greener pastures, aside from the fandom wars that are happening
The
online.
halcyon days of 2019.
Oh my gosh, what a time! And I'm glad that you kind of you perfectly segued with the bringing up of the Rogue Squadron and that kind of thing, because that brings me to what our next question here, which is kind of, I don't know if you all remember, but there was that big investor day in 2020, Disney Investor Day, which I still kind of watch from time to time just to like keep a pulse on where we were at that time. Which, and like, okay, this happened, this didn't happen. It's like I said, it announced a plethora of new content for Star Wars, as well as everything under the Disney umbrella. You're talking Marvel, National Geographic, FX, all that kind of stuff. And among the Star Wars offerings that were announced that day, some have come to fruition, and some are still stuck in the development process, and some have been outright canceled. So after reflecting on our conversation today, and knowing the behind the scenes details over the last 5 years, like I've told Greg C, we're way too in the know of this stuff as fans than ever before. I'm curious what if you guys will think that this era will be viewed as a success from the fan perspective, and perhaps from Disney Lucasfilm perspective as well. Greg M, let's start with you on this one. Where do you think the fans will think about this era, perhaps now and in the future? And what about on the business side of things? Do you think Lucasfilm and Disney are like, yeah, this was a good time?
Maybe this is a controversial take, but I think from
I
a
love controversial takes. Let's do it.
Mm.
it's what I'm all about, folks. Um, I think from a monetary standpoint, it'll look as if the streaming era, right now we're seeing everybody pull back. And I do think on the money side, the amount of money that was invested and lost, or gambled on the fact that streaming services were going to be the future and everything now was going to be TV, and not just
Hmm.
Disney Plus, but a lot of the other services as well. And you're going to see consolidation of some of these streaming services going forward. So I do think that it'll look back as almost like a roaring 20s of, let's just
Mm.
throw everything out there. And I think some of the shows will suffer for that because it'll just be lumped in with. And so, I think I think even maybe you start to see that creatively with Mando season three, where it's like you go back to Mando season one and two, where it seemed like it was very, these things are going, and it was really not, it was only competing with itself. There wasn't really anything else out there.
Hmm.
But then the more you try to branch out, it started to kind of, maybe collapse a bit under its own weight. And I think that, if we get to a point where there are fewer streaming, yeah, there's definitely going to be the streaming price that I'm paying for it, as I said before, not $14.99 or $7.99. Um, but I think if you're going to see fewer new TV shows and going back to trying to get that Deadpool money, or that,
Hmm.
that Inside Out 2 money, because they know it's there and they know they can get it again, I think you'll see an emphasis back to movies with a couple of shows in there, and I would be happy with it. But I think overall it was probably a grand experiment, and I think we've got a lot of content. I don't think we'll see to that extent again, with characters that aren't
Hmm.
necessarily forefront. Um, but boy, would I have loved to see more of Black Chrysanthemum and the twins, and and some of those, and Cad Bane, and some of these, where it's like in another time and place, 2019, where 2020, where it was all rosy skies ahead, we would have had a lot of
Hmm.
background content, and maybe that's where it belongs. Maybe it should have always been, instead of separate shows, blank a Star Wars story, where you could have, like the Clone Wars, you could have diverted from the Anakin and Obi-Wan, and where you could have told a story or two about this while moving the whole timeline, but slowly. And in that way, you wouldn't have had to
Hmm.
pigeonhole yourself into, well, we could have had a acolyte, but as part of something else, where it would have
Hmm.
been maybe treated a little nicer than it was when it was on its own and out there with a big target on its back.
Hmm. Very good points. Really good points. Greg C., where do you line on the successful nature of this era, and how do you think it'll be viewed over time?
I don't think Greg M's take was controversial enough. I
Yeah,
really
I don't
wanted
think
to
so.
see him
Yeah.
canceled.
Let me get Mike Zero on
Um,
the phone and we'll see.
give him time.
He
Give
can
him
help
time.
pump up
Yeah.
my story a bit.
Well, I do think just because you've brought it up a couple times, I will. I'm not here to prescribe something to all fandom, but the more I've checked out of the discourse behind the scenes, the better I feel about Star Wars, and it does help me just kind of take it for what it is. I definitely remember that investor call. I was we have moved since then, but I was standing in my own kitchen live streaming an investor call for like 3 hours. I'm like,
Yep.
what was I doing?
And it
How
was
did I have
live
that much free
streaming
time?
someone else's live stream that had access to the live stream.
It was just it's crazy to think about like how busy I've been lately and like what were you doing, man? I think Greg's take is largely correct that we're gonna see a pretty serious correction across all of these companies in light of the streaming era not having the profitability that we once thought it did. But I don't know that long term it will be really viewed as a failure because they had to try it, and I still think we're moving in those directions. I already confessed I'm at the movies 3 times a week minimum,
Yeah.
and yet I'm not in full theaters very often, right? Like I see that we're not there either, and I think the future really is going to be more of this at home content. But the fact that people are trying to juggle all these services, plus so many households are still running a cable subscription on top
Yep.
of that, I think it's getting a little insane for people, which is why you see those people who dip in and dip out of
Yeah.
services. And that's essentially what my wife and I do for our household. When we hear there's a hit show on something, I think the only ones we keep all the time are because somebody's paying for it. Our cell phone company buys us Netflix. Our
Yep.
last laptop purchase gave us Apple TV Plus, right? So it's like, that's why we keep those ones around. But otherwise, we cancel and then we pop back on for money for a little money when we have it. So from a fan perspective, I think this has to be viewed as a great time, right? Like this was a wonderful era, and it was not every single piece was great, but we got to have this big spike in community and we got more to talk about. And I don't think that should be discounted, even if that is not what Disney thought they were buying with their dollars. But
Yeah.
it was meaningful to all of us, and that's what matters. I mean, that's why you're in a fandom, right? It's for the other
That's
people, and
right.
it's for the connections. So I certainly will remember these last 5 years fondly, even when it was, me fighting with my friends about the fact that no, this episode was actually terrible. What are you talking about, or whatever, right? Like that's what fandom is.
Hey, and if you don't like an episode, guess what? There's chances are there's another one next week that maybe
Yeah.
can add more context or change
Yep.
how you feel about something. Like I know when we talked Bad Batch, we were like, oh, this is the "You're Not Ready" episodes, right? We're like,
Yeah.
oh, we felt pretty ready for these. I'm
was ready.
I'm waiting on bated breath to find out what's next.
Yeah.
Versus I know like especially like when Mando season 1 came out, I know a lot of the discourse was, where's this going? Is this just an episode of the week kind of thing? What are we doing here until the end? When it all kind of came together a little bit more with the reveal of the Darksaber and Moff Gideon and all that stuff. And then even Mando season 2 had a little bit of that. Okay, is this just episode of the week kind of thing? We're just introducing more people, expanding the world. So just to the fans at home on a week-to-week basis, I again preach patience. You never know where the full story is going. And even if you get a full season of something, there's always an opportunity for another story to be told that could add more context or clarity to something. I mean, look at all you people that didn't like the prequels. Now probably have a greater appreciation of them if they've seen Clone Wars and they're able to add more context to those characters and storylines. And thankfully, because of streaming, we were able to complete Clone Wars and have a place where we can watch them easily and readily rather than having full like 6 DVD sets of seasons after season of these shows. And another thing that I'll add to like I think are the positives of this era, and I think should be viewed as a success, is the diversity aspect of getting multiple people and thoughts and backgrounds behind the camera and working on these different productions John Favreau, I think, and team Dave Filoni, and as well as others, have done a wonderful job of bringing in these great talents in Hollywood to direct an episode or two. And for some of them, they keep them in the family. Like I think of a Rick Famuyiwa, who now is a showrunner on The Mandalorian and lead producer for that. Deborah Chow got Obi-Wan after her work on Mando. Taika Waititi got a movie, and we'll see if that ever happens. But talk
Maybe.
about another project released and thrown into the ether on this 2020 Investors Day. But I hope that continues to grow, because this Skeleton Crew is going to unveil a new group of people directing and actors and people behind the and in front of the camera that I think have been wonderful for expanding the known world of Star Wars. So I think that's been awesome.
There's some really good Skeleton Crew directors too. The Daniels, who
The
made
Daniels,
everything,
yeah.
everything, everywhere, all at once. Which the current. Oh no, we've had another year since then. But one of the recent Best Picture winners, and the
It's been
next
2
project
years.
they're gonna
Where's
do.
time gone?
Yeah, but they're gonna be the follow up to their Best Picture winner is a Star Wars episode. That's crazy. And when
That's
you
awesome.
heard them announce it, they were like, they asked, and it's Star Wars. Why would we say no? So absolutely, attracting that talent really is something important. I'm glad you said that.
Hear, hear. All right, gentlemen, we got our last question here. And I want to reflect on perhaps some of the lessons that Lucasfilm will take or should take from this time frame. What do you think that they should look to incorporate within future productions, as they seem to switch more towards the big screen when it comes to this type of stuff? Maybe animation will ramp up and we'll get announced a new project sooner or later in the future when it comes to that. And just future storytelling opportunities with all the technology that they've had and expanded upon over this time frame here. Greg C., you had alluded to that you have an answer for this, so I'm going to throw this one to you first. Where do you think that they should go with the lessons learned, and how should they incorporate those into future stuff?
So the one I alluded to, which is my number one answer, and I wrote a blog entry. Gosh, it's been like a year, I think, and that was the last time I wrote a blog. So it's been a busy year. But I wrote a blog entry about like what we should learn from the High Republic for live action Star Wars. And one of my major points was, you just have to find talented creators and you have to give them the freedom.
Yeah.
And so when I look at these projects across these years, the best ones are where they told somebody with a lot of talent to go make something. And number one on that list is Andor. It's Tony Gilroy's show, and he has controlled that. He's written the majority of the words. I'm not going to say every single word, but and he's incredibly talented, and we've gotten something transcending out of Star Wars in ways that are really deeply felt this week for a lot of people, and certainly were when they came out. And I will never not think of Marva Andor when something bad is going on in my life, or Nemec telling me to just try. And so I think I would also honestly, I would put Leslie Headland in that camp. It maybe didn't work as well for all people, and I've heard you, internet. I've heard you. It didn't work for you, but they gave somebody who's really talented. They gave her a lot of space to make a thing. I think the people who love it, and the people who didn't like it, they were never gonna like it. But I would absolutely not look at that show as a failure. And I think, if you can attract some of this really good talent still and give them freedom to go create something cool, I think that's the best lesson they could possibly take from this.
Here. Beautifully stated. And I will say too, like Tony Gilroy, for example, had an original plan for seasons of Andor, and he was like, I can do it in 2. And he changed it. And I know, I think we'd all prefer 4 seasons of Andor if that's the level of quality that we're getting. But I think we'll take 2 as well, because he's seeing it from start to finish and is having his singular voice and vision incorporated throughout, which I think we all appreciate. So here. Good job. Greg M., what are your thoughts on this one? What are the lessons to take away from this era, and what should they do for future storytelling?
I think it proves that the volume was a huge success. In that, especially now, if you look,
you missed our whole volume conversation.
You skip that.
I missed the volume, but it was a success. However, it does show we did see some of the limits of what the volume can and can't do. We've also seen whereas with, like really strong writing, incredibly strong writing. I mean, the Gilroys,
Hmm.
okay, they may have been in another stratosphere as far as that's concerned, but it does show you that if with judicious use of the volume and and different kinds of effects, writing, but also as well as like giving them like the boundaries. I think the Acolyte suffered because it was conceived during a different time
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
received
Yeah.
at a much different time in its life where it got judged against something it probably shouldn't have. It wasn't fair to go against its
Hmm.
budget because they greenlighted it. Now, like I said, if you set out the rules and like we need you to create something and this is what we're going to have to create it with, but do it, maybe hopefully they'll learn, like, if we want to make a TV show, let's move that towards. If we want to make a movie, don't be afraid because some of these might have been better made as a movie, and you could have taken stuff out. And someone like, yeah, we really would love more of it. Thinking of Andor, and
Hmm.
my
Hmm.
wife and I just finished rewatching Game of Thrones, and that last season, and I'm sitting here, now I'm watching it, going, maybe I was a little harsh on it, but there are some things going. It could have benefited with a couple more episodes. So there are some, I think, some
Yeah.
stories that take as much time as you need. You can make it episodic, you can make it serial. That's what George was going after. But some of them going, you know what, maybe you don't have to stretch this out, and maybe it's okay to make it a movie, or make it a movie for streaming where you don't
Hmm.
have to worry about that. You do a limited, cinematic release, get your bucks, make a couple of bones there. We'll go out and see it. I know Greg will see it 3 times that week, at least, because
A day.
that's his. Yeah, the first day he'll see it 3 times. But I think there's this happy medium, and I would say as a fan, I'm like, let's let them keep trying to figure it out because that just means we get more Star Wars.
Hmm.
And then, if nothing else, it gives us stuff to podcast about. Because the one thing I don't know if Greg answered, I'm like, what the Disney Plus really changed was podcasting, Star Wars
Hmm.
podcasting. Go listen to these where it's like you're fighting for something like, hey, I think this week we're going to talk about X, but then it's all of a sudden a show comes and everybody like, all right, I've got to get this, Forbes.com, for heaven's sakes. All of a sudden it's like, yeah, I'm going to go to an economic site to look at recaps of TV
Hmm.
shows. So in the
Mm.
streaming area, it's like TV shows and the recaps and the podcasts and so forth are big business. I see none of this money, by the way. However, I will still happily participate, and it's always fun. Like I said, in developing my a great relationship with Greg C, who let me crash with him at Celebration Anaheim, almost sight unseen. Like he'd seen me, but it's like we hadn't really known. And then he's like, "Hey,
Only from here down. Yeah.
only from
Yeah.
here down."
He's got legs.
How else was I
It
going
was the
to?
third
I
one
was
that was a
super.
surprise.
How else was I going to find that Greg was so tall? And I'm like, Anaheim. The lessons of Anaheim. I'm smaller than everybody, right? And I've seen shots of Anthony going. Anthony looks like 5'6". He's not 5'6", folks. He's actually a lot taller. So I'm
6
going to go.
foot,
I'm
I
going to
can
be.
tell you.
He's six
Mm.
foot. He's my son's size, and I'm going to meet him one of these days. I'm going to go, and I'm shorter than you too. But that's the lesson of 5 years of Disney Plus is everybody in this fandom is taller than I am. But I'm ready for the next 5 years of it. Let's bring it on, and let's do some more breakfast packs, and let's have some fun. That's what keeps us going.
Have some fun indeed. Some more acolyte and fluffy podcasts in the future, hopefully. I will
Yep.
say, I think people that listen to Star Wars podcasts should really feel the gift of these episodes that we currently have now, where it's like, okay, we're talking about this specific niche, right? You're talking about perhaps the Blast Points episode we've referenced already on this episode about female Return of the Jedi deleted scene pilot. We'll talk here about the 5-year anniversary
Brilliant
of Disney
episode.
Plus, right? We'll talk about rebuilding the galaxy on another episode, right? If you go back to 2016, in between after let's say a few months after Rogue One's come out and before the Last Jedi trailer release, it's like the episodes were, what planets could we potentially see in the Last Jedi? Or even before the Last Jedi was even a title, it was just before, what can we see in Star Wars Episode 8? And then it was just people listing off a bunch of planets and being like, this could be cool, this could be an idea, maybe they'll go back to Kashyyyk. Here's what this set photo might lead us to believe. That's so blurry and taken from 2 miles away with the zoomed in iPhone camera. Like, we're living in the
Many
golden
great
era of,
podcasts came and
yeah.
left, died before their time because they didn't get it. They didn't get the Disney Plus era to kill. Oh, we've got enough for
Yeah.
shows on down. That they were struggling with deleted scenes from Attack of the Clones, and they're like, we've done it twice already. We can't do it again.
We can't keep talking about Padme's family. It's just we have nothing to go off of here, guys.
There's nothing left. There's nothing left.
There's nothing left. Well, we've got, unfortunately, a lot more. Greg M, you know the whiteboard. We've already talked about the whiteboard with Greg C on this episode.
He's so organized. He's so more organized than I am.
We got episodes for years to come, and this is just what's already out there. Not even Skeleton Crew comes out in less than a month now, and hopefully Andor in 2025, and who knows beyond that. Maybe we'll get some movie stuff in the near future too. I'd love to go back to the cinema and see a Star Wars that hasn't already been released. So yeah, I think the future is bright. I will only say the thing that I hope they really take from this lesson, as a fan of Willow, is please give us a way to watch it. If you want to take it off the streaming service, please make it available on physical media or some other way. Shop it to another streaming site if you don't want to pay the full bill. Figure out a way to let art be consumed by people. At least, can I buy it on each episode individually on Apple like you used to back in the day?
Yeah,
I will do it.
It's criminal. It's
Yeah.
criminal that they disappeared a show. That's not right. So yeah, agreed.
I agree on that front. And I will say Young Indie too. You can't find it on Disney Plus nor any streaming site these days. So if you want the out-of-date DVDs that some of us don't even have DVD players anymore, or you buy the episodes individually on Apple at least, or Prime Video. But again, if find ways to make stuff accessible for people is all I'll say. Is a big lesson I think they should take away. That I think many streaming sites are learning, not just Disney Plus, but Max, I think, is also the biggest culprit of deleting stuff for a tax write-off. That's a whole other conversation. But hopefully Disney doesn't do that too often, at least not publicly, that we're aware of with projects that are important to our sector of interest. So anywho, great conversation, gentlemen. This has been fantastic. Greg M, I'm glad that you're able to rejoin us on this marathon episode here.
I know I know this podcast well. I know how this works.
You knew you had an opportunity. Yep. You didn't even text like, "Hey, are you still on?" You just knew. you were just taking the chance. You're like, if they're on, we're on. It's happening. So gentlemen, thank you both again for coming on here. Let's start. Greg C, where can the folks find you online? EyeOnCanon and the Long Take Review, and I assume Breakfast Pack is coming back for Skeleton Crew.
Yeah, actually, let's schedule that live on air. Greg, let's do a Skeleton Crew trailer reaction next week or the week after, and let's drag Anthony on to come back that quick for it. So,
and because I don't have a whiteboard, I'm like, okay. Sure,
but thank you very much for having me on. It was a pleasure to be back. Yes, so people can find me on social media at EyeOnCanon, EyeOnCanon. Breakfast Crew, Breakfast Pack will be, plugged in a moment. So I will say I'm also appearing weekly on Long Take Review, which is a movie review podcast. We cover everything, the range from the big popcorn movies right up to the Best Picture nominees. And it is very busy over there right now because they're finally releasing all these movies that have been at festivals for a couple months. So
this is your Super Bowl.
We just dropped. Let's see. We dropped Conclave and we dropped Anora, and I think we're recording Blitz or Substance for next week. So these are all out there in theaters or available on streaming. But nothing I just mentioned is not worth seeing. They're all pretty good. So check it out. And then
I saw Conclave, and that was excellent. So that's my plug there.
That's my front runner right now. I love Conclave.
Nice.
So, cool.
And Greg M, in case people forgot where they can find you an hour ago,
Scroll back.
Remind the folks where they can find you online, as well as Rebel Base Card.
I may have screwed myself time-wise, but I was happy to join the Fantatrax review pool for Skeleton Crew. I really wanted to try to expand not only what I was doing, but kind of like, stretch some writing legs. I used to blog a long time ago, and I do have a Substack that Greg and I have about the same frequency of writing on Substack. It's another thing we have in common, but it is something where it's like, I wanted to see, because I wasn't necessarily, I never saw Goonies. I didn't see E.T. I wasn't into the Amblin stuff because I was way in some of the other, like all the Star Wars and the Star Trek and the Battlestar Galactica. I was like, I was like, nah, I don't want to stay on Earth with a bunch of kids. I don't care about kids. But now I'm like, you know what? That last trailer really did catch me with kind of the
Save it.
tease.
Save it.
All right,
Save
all
it.
right, all right, all right. I'll say
Yeah, you're teasing the audience.
At any rate, but yeah, we'll have a to be announced skeleton crew with Anthony King and Greg Cass, as we discussed sometime down the road. The skeleton crew trailer, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, until that time, you can find me on Instagram, X, Threads, Hive, Blue Sky at Rebel Base Card.
Wonderful, wonderful. And thank you so much, folks, for listening to this look back at 5 years of Star Wars on Disney Plus. If you thought that one anniversary episode was enough, you are mistaken, because next week we are doing a 5-year anniversary episode on The Rise of Skywalker. So be excited for that and look for that in your podcast feeds very soon. Of course, you can find Force Ghost Conversations anywhere on the internet for X, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. Just search for Force Ghost Conversations and you'll find us there. And we'd love to continue the conversation with you all. And until next week, folks, may the Force be with you. Take care.